What's up guys? Matt, Legacy 4x4. We have the sprint car chassis turned over. Last video we finished the skid plate, we welded on some lower links. This time we're going to mount the transfer case as well as that tripler setup and then get pointing towards mounting the engine, transmission, as well as rear axle. So yeah, lots on the to-do list. We're going to go ahead and get started with the transfer case. I'll see you guys in a second. Okay, so first things first, don't judge my lack of rear jack stand. We're gonna go ahead and use that drink cooler. Yeah, don't judge, it's holding. It's gonna work until it doesn't work, kind of my motto. So as you can see on the transfer case, we have 4 bolt holes in order to bolt in the top left side of the transfer case, as well as the bottom right side, which you cannot see from this angle. But with that being said, we're gonna go ahead and use these mounting plates in order to mount against the chassis. And looking at the rear of the transfer case, this is how we're sitting. That rear drive shaft disconnect is sitting right against the edge of that 1/4" plate. That's about where we want it. But before we get into hard mounting this transfer case, we're gonna go ahead and take it back out, clean it up, put fresh fluids in it, and get it ready for install. Okay, so in order to get this case ready for install, we're gonna put fresh fluids in it. We're gonna drain all the old fluids out, and we're gonna make sure everything's functioning properly. Now, starting with the basics of this transfer case, it does have a twin stick, so we have low gear up front for this first gear shifter, neutral in the middle, and then high gear in the rear. So for high gear, you can see how much this gear is spinning. While we're in high gear, you can see it's closer to that 1-to-1 ratio. I'm actually not sure what the ratio is. It's probably close to 1-to-1. Regardless, let's put it in neutral. First shifter is in neutral. As you can see, we have no rotation. Transfer case is in neutral. Low gear, this is when you get 8.5-to-1. This is the lowest gearing you can possibly get for this case. And if I ever break these gearing, they're gonna be custom made to get new ones since no one sells them. Anyways, 8.5-to-1 gears, super low. Every 8.5 rotations of input is gonna be 1 rotation of the output, as you can see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, half. Give or take. I don't really know if that was 8.5, but you get it. Super low geared. You can see just how fast the input spins by going 1/4 turn on here. So super low gearing, but I'm getting away from myself. There are 2 more ports that we're gonna fix on this transfer case before we reinstall it. Well, 3 really. The front port right in front of the shifter on these Samurai transfer cases is for your indicator lights. That's gonna let you know you're in 4, high or low. I'm gonna go ahead and remove this entire port and put a plug right in here because I don't care about knowing if it's in 4 low, 4 high, 4-wheel, 2-wheel. I actually think it's going to stay 4 low permanently unless I get out of the car and shift it manually, but I'll get there when we get to mounting the seat and everything else because this is a complete toy. So either way, it might be all-time 4-wheel drive, so I'm really not worrying about it. What I'm going to do is go ahead and take this plug, lop off the front end, put a weld through it, and then put the plug back in. I could just get probably like a 1/2 MPT plug, do the same thing, but this is absolutely free. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that instead. Second thing, we have a vent tube on the top right here. This vent tube is gonna get replaced. That way I can have a fresh brass coupler here as well as fresh tube coming out of the transfer case to prevent any kind of explosion from fluid pressure. The last thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go under the case and we're gonna replace the drain plug as well, get that nice and sealed. That way we don't have any leaks coming out of this. If I was really smart, I would take this whole case apart and check all the internal seals, but just from having it sit in my shop for the last year, nothing's leaked out of it. Granted, I haven't ran it that hard, but none of the internal seals have leaked, so we're gonna cross our fingers and hope that we don't have to replace any internal seals, and we're just gonna replace those 3 ports, refreshen the whole thing, and should be good to go. But if worse comes to worse, I'll be digging back into here to replace all the internal seals. But those parts I can get, and I can buy those, so I'm not too worried about it. It's just the gearing I'm worried about if I break it. But I digress. We got like 50 horsepower pushing through it, so I think we'll be all right. I did run into one issue, which is why we're going to start the video here. Okay, so we're zoomed in. This is the input flange to the transfer case. Right next to that input flange is the countershaft for the transfer case. This countershaft has a little stay that's bolted in, and that stay is not holding in the countershaft at all. So this countershaft can freely spin and alternate and come up and down, and that's not good. That also might be a reason why this might be a little broken, but we're gonna get there. In either case, I'm gonna clean this up as best as I can. We're gonna remove the front drive shaft flange as well as like the twin stick assembly, and make sure we can get that detent set in place right. Once that detent's set in place, we're gonna go ahead and bolt everything back up, put fresh oil in it, and then we can talk about mounting it. But I'm gonna blast this apart and then we can talk detent for a little bit. So we have the counter shaft moving freely now. We removed all the bolts so the front output to come off. That way we can access the stay bolt. And now this is what we have left. We have the counter shaft spinning freely, we have the stay bolt, and we have the actual stay itself. So I'm gonna zoom in and show you why this isn't gonna work, and we're gonna have to make another one. Okay, so we have the counter shaft, we have the stay. If we shove the stay all the way into the counter shaft and then rotate over, we are probably 1/8 of the inch off. So that means at some point this stay obviously got cracked. You can see how it's not even. So we obviously lost a piece of the stay, and that's why this wasn't in place. Okay, so for these detents, here is the detent that we have to replace and make a longer little edge. We are going to use an old seat belt since this is relatively close to the same size. So we're going to go ahead and cut this out and grind it about half the depth and kind of bevel it into where the detent needs to go, stay needs to go, whatever you want to call it. And we'll push forward from there. So I've got one cut and in the grinder. We're going to go ahead and work some manual grinding magic on that. Okay, so boom, detent's back in place, new washer, new lock washer. That seatbelt detent's gonna work fine, I think. Before I go any further in building those mounts, I'm gonna cut off all of the excess tube on this chassis that I don't need, like all the hangers and part of the front where the skid plate's not there. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the sawzall out, cut everything off I don't need, that way I have a nice clean plate to work on. Okay, so I did a little bit of work off camera, including putting a coat of paint on the chassis, since I wasn't going to be able to work on it for about a day with some personal stuff. So chassis is painted the brown color we're going with on this one. Should be pretty unique. I'm happy with the brown, how it turned out. Should look much better when the red, black, and brown accents tied together. Coming into the driver's side of the transfer case, you can see we have the mount in place as well. It's 1/4 inch gusset made out of 4 triangles, so it can be nice and beefy, and that ties into the case bolts. These are the case bolts for that sandbox transfer case. If we zoom out a little bit, you can see how the gusset kind of ties in, sandwiches between the bolts and the case itself, and that's how that gusset's in place. It is already painted black, but you can see there's 3 staggering triangles to give it some parallel gussets as well. With that being said, we have the transfer case fully hard mounted now to work on that boat transmission. And lucky for you guys, I already did some work on the passenger side of this boat transmission, mounting it in place. So I'll show you that real quick and we'll talk about building the other side. Okay, I know that tube for the roll cage is kind of in the way, but you can see how the boat transmission mounts work and how they're in place right now. The front mount on the passenger side utilizes the 2 case mounts on the boat transmission itself, and then has a triangular gusset that is curved along with where the front drive shaft is going to rest. The second transmission mount is on the back half of that velvet drive boat transmission, and that goes into a single case bolt on this side. And if you're wondering why those are curved so low, it's because the front drive shaft is going to have to rest right there as it attaches to the carry bearing and then drops to the front axle. So that's why those gussets are cut so deep. And if you're wondering how we're going to cut out the gussets, it's my super fancy outdoor plasma cutting station with the rest of my scrap. This was a whole piece of 1/4 inch plate, but we use probably 3/4 of this now with doing the skid plate plus all these gussets and mounting hardware. So we're making good progress on it, adding quite a bit of weight, but also making good progress because these are nice and sturdy joints. Okay, so once we have the joints plasma cut out roughly, we're going to go ahead and start to clean them up as well as drill through them with our current bolting pattern. Now we're gonna clean up the edges and knock some of this slag off, dross if you will. Okay, so both are roughly mounted. I'm gonna burn them in, paint them black, and close this one out. Alright guys, so that's the transfer case, that both transmissions, everything's mounted in place. We got all the gussets, everything's nice and hard mounted. I still have no fluctuation or any kind of binding within that driveline, so I'm happy with it. I think it's gonna be solid. I know we jumped all over the place in this video. There was a lot to get done, so other than that, I think next time we'll be working on that rear axle and getting the axle as mounted as possible. And hi goat. All right, before my goats start eating everything in here, I'm gonna put them away and catch you guys next time.